This is the strongest version of the Lightning Strike Slayer that you can find anywhere on YouTube at this level of investment. With roughly 35 divines, you can melt through tier 17s, uber pinnacle bosses, sanctums, legion 5-ways, blight ravage maps, basically any and all content that you can think of with these. This video will teach you how the build works, how to play it, how to scale your damage and defenses, how to double your damage, as well as an entire section on how to craft and acquire all the different gear pieces that we need. If you are a new player, do not worry. I will be going over every little detail that other guide makers tend to overlook, so that this video is as new player friendly as possible. So please make sure to watch the whole thing, even if it's on 2x speed, so you know exactly what you're getting into and don't have any roadblocks as you are trying to set things up. Even if you are a PoE veteran, feel free to listen in as well as you know as well as I do that even after thousands of hours of playing this game, there's still potentially more you can learn and things you might not know. As always, there is a link to a spreadsheet in the description with cost breakdowns and crafting info, but please know that prices of things can change based on how much time has passed since this was uploaded. Before we begin, if you want to be part of a fresh new community on Discord where you can talk, help each other out, and get any help as a new player, or help other people out if you are a veteran player, or if you just want to flex your loot and godlike RNG, then feel free to join in. There is a link to it in the description and I would love to have you there. Now back to the video. Hello YouTube, how's everybody doing? I've been racking my head really trying to make a Lightning Strike Slayer build, but I wanted to make it as efficient as possible and as tanky as possible with as much damage as possible at the lowest budget level possible for my fellow office workers, family people, and people who are trying to balance those things with college out there. So you guys can't really spend hundreds of divines on a build, but maybe you still want to experience the strongest build of the league and get that fast-paced, high-octane gameplay. So this is going to be exactly that. Now, there are a lot of different things going on in this version that other versions are not using, so I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Let's begin with our skill of choice, which is going to be Val Lightning Strike. This skill has two parts. The first part is the melee hit where you slam the ground or you strike the ground and a bolt of lightning comes down from the sky and lands where you hit. The second portion is once you strike the ground, it fires off projectiles from where you struck behind it. Right, so there's the melee hit and then there's the projectiles that come from the melee hit. Now, you cannot hit an enemy with both of these because if you hit them with the melee hit, the projectiles will fire out behind them, so you cannot hit them with both. However, there is a way that you can hit them with both the melee hit and the projectiles from the melee hit at the same time. Now I'll go over how to do that further on in the video in the simplest way possible, so don't worry. The projectiles from this skill help make the clearing ability of this skill way nicer, and it also has extremely good boss damage, and with the turning projectiles and pierce, it makes it even better. For offenses, there are a few normal things that every other build is doing, and then there's a few different things, so just keep listening. At first, we have our basic elemental claw, the cheapest way to scale our damage here. There are dagger versions of this, but those are very expensive. So elemental claw with as much flat elemental damage on this as possible, with a hits cannot be evaded so that we don't need to worry about our accuracy. We scale all of our damage by applying almost every single ailment in the game: bleed, poison, brittle, scorch, sapped, chill, shock, blind, everything. The only thing we don't apply is freeze. So we do that because we are using 2 taming rings and a yoke of suffering. All 3 of these unique state that they give you percentage increases or more damage based on how many ailments are inflicted on the enemy. So the more ailments they have, the more percentage increases we get on all the flat damage that we have from our claw, as well as a bunch of abyss jewels giving us a bunch more flat damage as well. However, the biggest way we scale our damage is through the use of a tincture, a new thing or an old new thing that GGG decided to add back in this league. Before you get worried, no, the tincture is not inflating our damage numbers for something that we can only turn on for like 2 or 3 seconds and then it turns off because we no longer have the mana regen or the mana sustain to keep it up. So no, this is not that. Right, we keep our tincture up for a solid 30, 40 seconds, maybe even more as long as you're hitting something. And while this tincture is up, this more than doubles our damage fully. If completely doubles our damage, we go from like 35 million damage to like 80, 90 million damage with the tincture up. So how do we keep this up? Well, there are 2 different ways that we do this. The first is Slayer's Overleech, giving us a very decent amount of life recovery. Even when we aren't actively hitting something, the leech still goes on for a few seconds. So while we're moving from pack to pack of monsters, we don't just suddenly die. Now, why would we suddenly die? Because the next thing that we are using is Weeping Wounds, a small little cheeky notable that says that Tincture Mana Burn affects your life instead of your mana pool. So instead of mana burn, you are stacking up Weeping Wound stacks instead. So these stacks burn your health instead of your mana, which is why the Slayer's Overleech and Instant Leech help us stay alive and help keep this tincture on for a really, really long time. So I've gone up to like 60, 70, sometimes 80 stacks of Weeping Wounds while mapping, which is roughly over an entire minute of tincture uptime. And most of the time, you won't even need this for mapping anyway. This is primarily so that when you finally reach the boss at the end of the tier 17 map, or if you're doing an Uber Pinnacle boss, you don't have to turn your tincture on and quickly use everything that you have in that 2-3 second window before it turns off, right? That's not the case here. You can freely, comfortably use this tincture whenever you want and just leave it on and not really think about it as long as you're hitting something. However, do make sure to turn it off before you degen down to 1 HP. It does turn off automatically when you hit 1 HP, so it doesn't kill you even if you leave it on, but it is still spooky. If you want to test this out, be sure to do it in a map or somewhere where there's monsters because it does not work in your hideout. Now, the other offensive way that we are using is through the use of the Return of Affliction Spectres, more specifically the Dark Marionette Spectre. This Spectre isn't particularly special, doesn't do anything, doesn't do much damage in our builds. It does in other ones, but the thing that makes this Spectre different is, unlike other Spectres, if they die, you have to resummon them, or with Affliction Spectres, you have to get the corpses again. These do not have that problem. They resummon themselves on death, which allows us to use Guardian's Blessing support linked to any aura that we want to give us a free aura that we can use anytime that Spectre is alive, and that will be most of the time. So it's not alive always because the Guardian's Blessing does degen the Spectre down and then it dies, then it resummons itself back after 4 seconds. In previous leagues, this used to work without any cooldown. So the moment it died, it would respawn itself immediately. So people would use 2 of these, and then one would die, but the other would still be alive. So your aura would stay on, and so it would just bounce between the 2. So you would never have to turn your aura back on again. However, since this has now been changed, we can't really use 2 of them. There's no reason to. We use 1. If it dies, we don't have that aura up, but that's completely fine. The aura isn't needed for anything at all. The most you're going to be using it for, when you reach the boss, again, you will always have your Spectre ready when the boss is arriving, when the boss is playing that initial animation that all bosses play. Your Spectre will be alive. You'll turn your aura on, and in our case, we are using haste, and then you will delete the thing nearly instantly, right, before that aura ever turns off. So it's completely smooth. There is no cast time for this aura. There's no animation for this aura. You can just press the button and it turns on as long as your Spectre is alive. That's it. Yet another offensive layer that we have is the use of a Sigil of Power. This skill gem places a circle on the ground around you for 12 seconds, and the more mana you spend inside it, the more stages it gains, up to a maximum of 4. While it is at 4 stages, it also makes enemies inside it do less damage to you. So each stage gives you a certain amount of flat lightning damage to attacks, so each of these stages gives us millions more DPS, so this is ideal to reach that boss, put this down, and just slam away without moving, without caring, and just, it feels amazing. Trust me, you've seen the footage in the background, it feels amazing. And the final offensive layer, this is fairly straightforward, is the use of the Pantheon and Ascendancy to scale our endurance charges with our maximum frenzy charges, and using Royal Kirsch's boots, we are always at maximum frenzy and maximum endurance charges, so that's 7 of each. And we're using Arn's Anguish. This belt states that we now gain brutality charges instead of endurance charges. It does not convert our endurance charges to brutality charges like how it used to before these boots got changed. Now, these boots give us our maximum endurance charges, but we can also gain brutality charges as long as we have a way to generate endurance charges, and we do that through the use of the Disciple of the Unyielding on our passive tree. This keeps us at maximum charges just for all the time while we are mapping, and for bossing we use Enduring Cry. This puts us at 5 brutality charges, so we won't be at max, but 5 is more than enough, with us getting 3% chance to deal triple damage per charge. So 5 charges gives us 15% chance, and with how fast we are attacking, that procs fairly often. For our defenses, it's pretty simple. First, I have to iterate this is not a face tanking build. If you saw my previous guide, that was a face tanky character. That was an insanely tanky and cheap character to start off with. But this character is not going to be as tanky or even close to it, right? But this build can take a hit. I have designed this to be able to take many hits, right? However, that it's only possible if we are constantly hitting something while we are taking those hits, because if we are not hitting something, we have no regen, and if we don't have regen, we will take those hits and survive them, but if we take too many, we will die, right? So this does have a decent amount of one-shot protection because of all the defensive layers it has, but it cannot protect you if you get hit too much, or if you get hit by something that's way too big, like a slam of any kind. So be wary of that. You will have to dodge some abilities of certain tier 17 bosses and certain uber bosses. You have to dodge the slams, you have to dodge the explosions, but other than that, you should be a-okay. We use 2 defensive auras, that is going to be Flesh and Stone and Arctic Armor. Both of these give you a less damage taken effect. Flesh and Stone gives us less damage taken by enemies nearby, and Arctic Armor gives us less physical damage and fire damage taken if we are stationary, and that stationary tag is active anytime we stand still, even for a fraction of a second, so it applies whenever we stop to even use our lightning skill once. The moment we strike the ground, we are stationary, so it applies. So for bosses, you just have to stand still and just hold down your lightning strike key, and that's it, and dodge the big slams. Hopefully you won't even need to, because you'll kill them before they even use it. Right, so this combined with standing inside of our Sigil of Power also gives us a very decent amount of damage reduction on those bosses, so we can tank fairly decently. With that, we also have the newly buffed 7 endurance charges, we have cap suppression, ailment immunity, corrupted blood immunity, stun immunity, and then of course the Slayer overleech and instant leech effects. Ideally though, this build is kill things fast and do not let them hit you too much. The primary weakness of this build, and the only weakness of this build, is not hitting something. If something is phasing and hurting you while it's phasing, you can't heal off of anything, you can't leech off of anything, so you will be able to take a hit or 2 hits, but without anything to leech off of, you will die. So just don't do anything that has phases and you'll be good to go. Or just dodge. That's it for the offenses and the defenses. Now we're going to go in-game and see the items and the passive tree. The passive tree is very, very important, so be sure to skip to that if you don't care about the items. So, items first. As I said, we use an elemental damage claw with a bunch of flat elemental damage, right? So and on mine I have a tier 1, tier 0 essence mod, and then a tier 2 cold damage. all you need. You don't need tier 1. If you get tier 1, great, but this can be fine. You can buy these off of trade for like 3-4 divines, so that's very easy. You hit tier 2 or tier 1 other element, and then you just craft multi-mod, crit, and hits can't be evaded, and you're done. Right? Besides this, we have our gloves. Very simple. We just buy fractured bases and then spam essences until we hit the mods we want. There aren't any particular mods we want. We just want resistances and life, and that is it. Implicits on these, we want rage on attack hit and projectiles pierce an additional target. Very important. Rage on attack hit is very, very important, and I will explain why that is in the end. I'm going to leave this section for the items only. Right? The craft on this, we only care about projectiles piercing an additional target. We don't really care about the level of socketed projectile gem because there is nothing in this that is a projectile gem. Right? Helmet, exactly the same thing. Fractured suppression, resistances, and life, and the same craft here as well, or even more pierce. And implicits on these are going to be mana reservation and reduce mana cost of attacks. That's it. Very simple. Shield is a bit complicated, so again we will want a fractured base. I just had this laying around, so I'm using this, but you will take a fractured suppression base and you will spam greed essences on it until you hit physical damage reduction, or if you hit attack speed or some other things. I'll go over that in more detail in the crafting section and in the spreadsheet crafting guide. Boots, as I said, ratifications and patience. Ideally get these non-corrupted so that you don't have a trouble coloring these, but yeah, body armor is pretty important. Again, fractured suppression base with the essence mod on it that says you take reduced extra damage from critical strikes per endurance charge. This almost makes the crit mods on tier 17 maps non-existent. This is an expensive essence. It uses essences of horror to get this, and those are like 30-35C each. So you will not need to get a perfect body armor. You can just need like 5 essences to just get something moderately decent, and then the rest is just fine. Okay, so I'll go over that in more detail in the crafting section again. Implicits are melee hits have chance to fortify, and aura effect, pretty simple. Right, for our rings and our amulet, we are using the taming rings for increased elemental damage with hits per ailment on the enemy. Same thing here, and same thing with our yoke of suffering as well. Increased damage for each type of ailment you have inflicted on them, and some resistances. Everything else on there doesn't matter at all. For our anoint, we are using Legacy of the Wilds. This gives us a massive boost to our tincture damage, which is very, very noticeable. However, there is another anoint that you can also use if you are struggling with the double hit parts, and I'll tell you about that when we are focusing on that later on. So, passive tree. Right, so it's a fairly easy to understand one, but there's a lot of stuff happening on this, so I'll go over that slowly. So, first of all, we have one large thread of hope. That is mostly because we don't really want to path over these small garbage nodes that make you waste a ton of points, right? We just want Disciple of the Unyielding so that we have endurance charge generation while mapping, and we want this. We don't need frenzy's charge generation, but having 8% increased damage per frenzy charge and 8% increased damage per endurance charge when we have 7 of each is pretty damn strong. Along with that, we also have this. This just makes us have a bunch more overleach effect. Really, really good for 1 point. That's why we're taking it. Everything else does not matter with the large thread of hope. So that's that. We are using 2 cluster jewels. Both of them are exactly the same. You want them with Feed the Fury. This is the most important notable. Everything else doesn't really matter much. Right? Martial prowess does not matter. This doesn't matter. It gives you some damage, but ideally you just want Feed the Fury with any other notables at all. Right? We also use a small cluster, Seekers of Suffering. This is what allows us to inflict Scorch, Brittle, and Sapped. But then we can't inflict Ignite, Chill, Freeze, or Shock. But we are using Skitterbots, and those help us inflict Chill and Shock. Ignite and Freeze we don't care about. Right, besides this, we have the other cluster jewel. Again, it's just Feed the Fury, and then everything else. I got Martial Prowess. Right, and then we have a bunch of different tattoos on the build as well. So we have a chance to blind. This helps because we do have some evasion rating, right? We do have some armor and evasion rating, so having this blinding the enemy gives us a more chance to evade attacks, and we do evade attacks fairly decent amount. Right? And we have some cold rest tattoos. We really need these because we do struggle on capping our resistances because of the fact that we are using a bunch of different uniques, and we aren't really using a bunch of rares, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different uniques, right? And they aren't really giving us that many resistances. So we need to cap out our cold res through tattoos on the dex nodes. We have more than enough dex for this, so don't worry about it. Right? If you have more money, you can even use mark effect tattoos. Those are 1 div each almost, so that's pretty expensive, but they do give a decent amount of damage if you use them. Right? And then we have our beautiful node over here, Blood-Soaked Blade. This is what gives us Weeping Wounds and allows us to use our tincture safely and efficiently. So there's that. And then we have a Lethal Pride. Very important here. Love Timeless Jewels. I don't know why more builds don't use these. Every build should have a Timeless Jewel in them because it just makes life so much easier. Because this one Timeless Jewel fixes our entire strength requirements. Because look, without this jewel, I have 62 strength. Right? None of my gear pieces are giving me strength. It's just this one jewel. Hang on, my Spectre died. Yeah. So it's just that one jewel. So very important. The most important mod that you want with this Lethal Pride is going to be, where is it? Let me find it. It's going to be this one here. 10% chance to intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on hit. This makes them take 10% increased attack damage. Pretty important. Everything else is fairly simple. I just have life, chance to deal double damage, life, physical damage doesn't matter much, reduce crit, armor, double damage, right? So you just need those. I have the link to the spreadsheet in the description that mentions all the good mods that you can use here. There's that. And then we have our tincture effect node over here. You really need this. This gives you a bunch of damage, and this also makes, if you have used a life flask recently, which is in the past 4 seconds, you get even more tincture effect. So pretty nice. We do have to take this intelligence node over here because we do lack intelligence, and if you try to get it on any one of our gear pieces, then we start lacking resistances, so that's pretty bad. So there's that. We use Ancestral Vision to cap out our elemental ailments. So if you see here, it's not going to show here, but if you look in the POB, I have exactly 110% chance to suppress spell damage from my gloves, my body armor, my helmet, and my shield, plus these nodes over here. These all give me a total of 110% chance to suppress spell damage, and we need that because 50% of that is applying to ailment avoidance, and we get the last little bit from our shield suffix. We need 25 here exactly. So when you are gearing up, right, you can get higher or lower numbers on your suppression. You just need them to add up to be 110 suppression. Okay, so if your body armor is 19, you need your shield or something else to be 1 more, right? So keep that in mind. Very important. You need to be ailment immune if you want to do tier 17 maps. Without being ailment immune, you will feel pretty crappy doing it. Right now it says my ignite and chill avoid is 105%. That is because of this node here that says that I have 10% more while I'm on full life. You can't rely on that at all, right? Because you will never be on full life all the time. So I'm actually on 100%. That I'm not on full life, that's because I have 110 suppression. Right, so there's that. That's mostly it for the passive tree. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. If you're wondering why we're taking bleed, it's again because of the yoke of suffering, because more ailments, more damage, but also because 80% increased chance against bleeding enemies. This is a lot of damage, as you can see for yourself when you are using the POB. So pretty good there. Also, one more thing. Where is it? This is where we get our non-wall strike skills. Target 1 additional nearby enemy. This is pretty damn important because this is how we are going to be double hitting the same enemy. So let's go over that now too. So we're going to really quickly go over how to double hit with lightning strike. It's very easy, so bear with me and I'll make you a pro at it in the next like 2 minutes. So lightning strike, if you use the ability by itself, you can see that it strikes the ground and projectiles fire off from where that strike happened. Right? So they fire off from behind in the strike. This is why you can't hit an enemy with both the melee hit and the projectiles at the same time if we're hitting him from melee range. However, because of the fact that we have this mastery, which makes non-Val strike skills target one additional nearby enemy, so not Val lightning strike, but the normal lightning strike, if we are near the enemy, we can hit him or her or whatever with both things. If I'm hitting behind me like this, right, as long as the enemy is still near me, it's still getting hit. So one advantage that we have here is we use Flesh and Stone, and that's this aura that you see around me, right? So as long as the enemy is like right around this part right here, which is the outer ring of this aura, you can just attack. You have to press spacebar or press whatever your skill ability is right in front of you, right? That'll make your character strike the ground in front of you, and the nearby strike skills will be hitting the boss. So this way, if the boss is standing right there, you will be hitting with both the projectiles from you hitting and the projectiles coming out of that, and the strike hitting the boss too. And both of these strikes spawn their own projectiles, which all then come back from returning projectiles, which makes this really, really strong. Right, so let's now test this on the boss right here. Right, this is a pretty not tanky boss. I'm not going to hit it too much. Right, so if you can see, first of all, if I'm not even hitting, if I'm hitting the other way, you can see that it's getting hit. Right, if I hit him just directly, you can see it's just him getting hit. So there's two of them, but you get the point. But if I put them right around the edge over here, then you can see that that one just instantly melted away. Like it's gone. Right, it's gone. So you can see that the damage really, really heavily intensifies the moment you actually double hit something. So that's that. They dropped absolutely nothing. Go figures. But that is how you double hit with lightning strike. Congratulations, now you know. But if you do not know and you are still struggling, there's an amulet anoint that you can get called Sion's Ambition. You can search that up in the POB. That makes it so your strike skills can target enemies from 40% further away. So instead of this ring, right, you'll be like till here, and you can still hit the boss with both strikes. That makes the build feel safer, and it's more new player friendly. So if you are struggling with the double hits, you can take that anoint, but this anoint is way too powerful to not take, so I'm settling with this one. But if you're a newer player and you don't really get it, how to use it, then go for that anoint. That'll make double hitting much easier. That's it. Little node over here for 50% chance to poison on hit. We aren't doing any damage with poison. This is again only for the Yoke of Suffering, and that is all. Right, that's the passive tree. So let's quickly go over the Flask setup here as well. So you will not be using a Progenesis or a Dying Sun, right? That's just for me. I was using it because that is what you should be using further down the line. But for the budget setup, we'll be using an Amethyst Flask. You will be using a Ruby Flask or a Sapphire Flask or a Quicksilver Flask, whatever you prefer to have in this 5th slot. But you do need one Onslaught Flask because Onslaught is nice, right? You need one Amethyst Flask because we do not have capped Chaos Res, and having 64% Chaos Res is way, way better than having 20% Chaos Res, especially when you start clicking altars that give Fizz as extra Chaos, especially when there's poison mobs in tier 17 maps and all that stuff. You really need to have this tincture on you, so have that on you. Have both of these with chance to gain a fast charge when you deal a critical strike, because we are basically crit capped. It doesn't show here, but it shows in the POB that if something's bleeding and we apply brittle and everything, it will always be basically 100% crit chance. So this will almost always be giving you fast charges. Try to make sure it's tier 1. That'll be Surgeons. You get 30% chance to get a fast charge, and then suffixes are up to you, but the best ones would be reduced effective curses, increased evasion rating, and then increased armor would be another best one, but I don't have that, so boo-hoo. But yeah, increased armor or increased movement speed or increased elemental resistances, whatever you want as the other suffix. But yeah, evasion rating is nice, armor is nice, curse effect is pretty important. Right, also I forgot to go over the belt before, right? This is the Arn's Anguish, pretty simple. Find one that has a lot of life, highest life, and good fire res. You don't really need to find any good implicit on this. The implicit doesn't give an insane amount of damage, but if you can find one with anger effect, or crit multi during flask effect, or attack speed during flask effect, Those are great, right? That is all, and that is it. Quick note about the Pantheon. We use Soul of the Brine King because we want stun immunity, and we use Soul of Aberrath for burning ground immunity because you really don't want more degens on you while you're already being degened by your tincture. So burning ground immunity is pretty nice. I always take this no matter what build I'm playing. I just love being immune to burning ground. So those are your Pantheons. I forgot to go over the Ascendancy too, so let's go over that too. My bad. Very all over the place. So this is the Ascendancy for the tree, right? This is where we are getting our Overleech. Overleech is basically life leech that doesn't end when your life is full. So you will keep leeching even when you're full on life, and you take reduced damage while you're leeching. This is what gives us our insane frenzy and endurance charges, because this makes us have our maximum endurance charges equal to our maximum frenzy, and it gives us +1 frenzy, which is why we are scaling all of our maximum frenzy charges here and up there and down here. Right, and then here we have Bane of Legends. This gives us 10% more damage if we've killed recently, and 20% more damage with hits against unique enemies, and makes us physical reflect immune, so pretty nice there. And Headsman, this gives us 20% culling strike, which is extremely powerful, and gives us 10% attack speed if we've killed a rare recently, and some movement speed if we've killed recently. Those are pretty nice to have, not that important. Main thing is the 20% cull. Other things on this aren't really needed. We don't need this. We don't need Endless Hunger. It's good, but we don't really need it, right? Impact is pretty irrelevant here too. So that's that. That is everything. Abyss Jewels, quickly going over those, is just a bunch of flat damage. I'll go over how to craft these in the crafting section. Right, that's it. That's everything. And now I will see you in the crafting section for this. So take care and bye-bye. Frostblink and Sigil of Power linked with Life Tap and Enduring Cry. So we don't need to spend any mana on any of these. It's all linked to our life. Right? We don't have enough intelligence to have a max level Sigil of Power, so it's only at level 7. For our boots, we have Haste, Arctic Armor, Rage Spectre, and Guardian's Blessing. This is the Guardian's Blessing support right here. It does not work with Arctic Armor, so don't worry. This only works with gems that have the aura tag on them. Arctic Armor does not have the aura tag. Haste does, so that's why this works with Haste. So you don't need to worry about this being linked or not linked. In our shield, we have Whirling Blades, faster attacks, and again, Life Tap. So this does not take any mana either. In our helmet, this is where we have all of our auras. You need 1 Enlightened level 3. You can make do with Enlightened level 2 as well. That's what I was using before. Completely fine. Summon Skitterbots, level 21. No quality needed at all. Anger, also level 21. And Flesh and Stone, also level 21. Quality on any of these do not matter. Right, for our main 6th lane, we have Wild Lightning Strike, level 20. Make sure this is 20% quality because it does give you an extra projectile. Trinity support, Inspiration, Nightblade, Multi-Strike, and Returning Projectiles, all pretty straightforward. If you don't understand how Trinity works, I'll quickly just TLDR this. This basically works that you want to have all 3 different types of elements to make Trinity the most useful, because it makes you gain resonance for each element that you are hitting with per second for 2 seconds. So once you're hitting something, if you're hitting something with a lot of lightning damage, it'll keep giving you lightning resonance. And then if you stop hitting with lightning damage, it won't give you lightning resonance, right? But you want there to be all resonance for all of your different elements, right? Because it says 3% more elemental damage per 5 of lowest resonance. But if all of the elements are at max resonance, that means they're all lowest technically, right? So you just want to hit with a lot of lightning damage, a lot of fire damage, and a lot of cold damage, that those 3 keep cycling through, and you're always at max resonance for all of them. And max resonance is 50, if you can see here, 50. And you get this instantly in any map. You can see in the top left, you'll see this tiny icon with 3 different bars, and those bars are full. That means you're at full resonance for all of them, and you will always be at full resonance for all of them. So don't worry about it. Right, that's basically it. Pretty sure that's everything. Oh, Claw, Life Tap, Mark on Hit, Stats Mark. Again, doesn't need any mana, and this gives a bunch of extra crit multi, crit chance, everything. Really good, really strong. That's it. Right, that is everything. I will go over the POB as well, because there are some tiny things in the POB that you guys should know about. So let's go over there. So real quick in the POB, I just wanted to show that this is the exact same tree that you saw in game, right? I just wanted to show a bit about the config and how this is configured so that people aren't like, why are these numbers so strange, right? So the actual hit of our build, the melee hit does 33 million damage, right? The melee hit, right? And the projectiles do 47 million damage. And if we are doing the double hit thing, which you should be, right, you will be doing 81 million total damage if you're hitting something with both the melee and the projectiles, and when the projectiles start coming back as well, right? Because 81 million is taking into account 40% more damage from the returning projectile buff. This is technically supposed to be like 70 or 80% more damage if all the projectiles come back, but I wanted to be a bit more conservative. Maybe some projectiles don't hit, maybe the boss moves out of the way or something. So 40% more damage, conservative. You will notice this a lot, so don't worry about it. Right, so that's that. I have this set to 5 endurance charges, which is basically 5 brutality charges. This is so we are perfectly accurately set for damage on bosses, right? Not on enemies. This is exactly the amount of damage that you can expect on any boss, right? Any boss. So there's that. Sizzle of Power at 4 stacks. Trinity at 50, because I said we will always be at 50. We're always leeching. We'll always be at 30 rage because we get rage pretty quickly, right? You can turn this off if you want, because yeah, this probably won't happen if the boss doesn't have any ads around them at all. So you can turn that on or off depending on what boss you're facing. And most bosses do have some ads somewhere, but you can turn this off or on, up to you, right? Everything else about here, these are very, very conservative numbers for everything, right? Scorch is 13. Chill is always going to be 17 because of skitterbots. Brittle is 2. Sapped is 14. If you're playing, you'll be able to see exactly how potent all of these stacks are on the enemy that you're hitting. You'll almost always see higher numbers of Brittle, higher numbers of Sap, higher numbers of Scorch. You'll see higher numbers for all of these. So keep that in mind. These are also pretty conservative. Right, Intimidate is also checked on because that'll always be on. There's also the Tincture effect over here for 15% increased effect. This, if you've used a Life Flask recently, Life Flask gain charges so damn fast, so you will always have this up. Always, it'll always be up, as long as you're tapping your Life Flask every now and then. Right, so Tincture, again, as I said, this thing doubles, like 38 to 81. Like this is the massive, massive damage that we get from this. Do not skip this. This is pretty damn important. One thing to note is you have to manually remove the line on your tincture that says 35% increased effect, or whatever increased effect that your tincture has. You have to remove it, otherwise it will double down and double the effect twice, right? So don't do that. You have to remove that line and just write down the numbers as you see them. So in game, my tincture has 21% increased effect, right? It's tier 1 penetration and tier 1 effect without the increased mana burn. So this is how much that is, and the increased effect applies on its own, as you can see, right? It doesn't need to be added in, it's just there already. It goes from 19 to 27. So that's it, right? So you have to manually just go into edit and just remove this line and then save, and that'll be done. Okay. Besides that, that's everything. I have not checked on any of the flasks, anything. If you want to be more tanky, and if you don't want this Spectre setup, you want to be tanky instead, then you can use Steel Skin, Automation, and Life Tap in your boots instead of the Raise Spectre, Guardian Support, and Aura setup. You will lose haste, so your damage will go down, but you will get some conditional tankiness. I just didn't like it because this lasts for 1.5 seconds and has a 3-second cooldown. So it's just, it turns on, turns off, turns on, turns off. Not that great, but it does give you a decent amount of max hit. But again, 28,000 is still fairly pretty good, especially at this much damage, at this low investment. This is pretty good to have. That's all. That's it. If there's any questions, if there's anything I missed, please feel free to ask me in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer everything. So bye-bye. All right, so this is the crafting section of the guide. So I'm going to make this as simple as possible and as quick as possible so that doesn't take too long and gets you all the information that you need to know. So the most important thing that you're going to be crafting is going to be your shield, right? The shield is very important because this is where you need a very, very important stat. You need your ailment avoidance on your shield, right? And the total number of suppression that you need in this build is going to be 110%, but that can change if you get a high roll of ailment avoidance on your shield, right? So once you get your factor suppression base, you're going to be using Essences of Greed, right? You're going to be spamming these until you hit ailment avoidance, right? You want to hit ailment avoidance, or you want to hit additional physical damage reduction, one of those two, right? So I'm going to use these essences and we will stop when I see either one. Oh, there we go, right? So there it is. So this shield here is pretty decent, right? It has our essence mod. It has increased chance to block, which is a very good mod to have. Increased chance to block is amazing. Armor and evasion also pretty decent, but it has tier 1 strength. So we need one open suffix if we don't already have ailment avoidance on this, right? So you need to annul and hope it hits strength. It hit physical damage reduction, so now you'll have to start again, right? So you just spam these essences until you hit one of those two. So here it is. We had 17% chance to avoid ailments, which is not enough, so we need to go again. So here's a pretty good example of what is a very, very good thing that can happen. Right, so here we have 33% chance to avoid elemental ailments. This means that we no longer have the extreme requirement to need 110% suppression, right? This makes it so you can actually get close to around 105 suppression, which, trust me, when you're going to go buy the fractured bases, every 1% extra that you buy are going to be way, way more expensive, especially depending on the base that you're trying to buy them on. So keep that in mind. If you have 33 here, I think you need around 105 or 104 suppression, but you will need to put this into your POB and calculate this yourself. So keep that in mind. But we also do need some other good mods on this, right? So you can stay with that additional strength there, but I want to annul it off. I didn't annul it off, but let's say that you do randomly annul off that strength above. That strength really just doesn't want to go at, there you go. Okay, so the strength is gone. Right, now you just craft physical damage reduction. Right, the crafted one is only up till 3, but it's still very good. And we have 2 open prefixes here, so you just exalt those 2 on. Again, increased chance to block is the best one because this gives us from 20% chance to block. From 26, it goes up to like 50 almost, which if you've played any sort of block character, that's pretty strong. Okay, so the way to craft these is exactly the same as your shield with essences. However, we will be using NV essences. Now, these are like somewhat expensive now. They're like 4 or 5C each, I think. So be careful with it. You can use screamings and not deafenings instead. That's completely going to be fine, right? Like NV tier 3 is 24 chaos res versus tier 1, which is 34. It's not that massive of a difference. So you can use tier 3s, right? So you want to keep doing this until you hit any one other resistance at a high tier. So either fire, cold, or lightning. Right, so we're going to keep going until we hit one of those. So we hit one here, tier 7. No, we keep going. We hit one here, here we go. This is tier 1 cold res, we're tier 3 chaos res. We're done. Okay, that's literally all we need. We have 2 open prefixes, so we're going to exalt slam one of them. So first you want to block something, and the best thing you can block, honestly, is going to be physical damage leech, or you can block armor or armor invasion. Whatever you want to block, you can block. I'm going to block physical damage leech, and actually no, I'm going to just block armor. Saying we're going to craft on percentage increase armor and evasion. Here it is. We craft that on, and then we exalt slam, hoping to hit life. We didn't hit life. unfortunate, but that's completely fine. We don't really need it. It would be great to have, but in order to make this as cheap as possible, we want to use as few essences as possible, right? We just want to hit a tier 1 or tier 2 resistance and then just craft this mod on and exalt slam anything if it has any open prefixes. So there's your gloves, done. Suppression, chaos res, one other tier 1 resistance, and just a bunch of random prefixes. You can always change your prefixes later on if you want to, but suffixes are what really matters here. You can also just buy gloves like these off of trade if you want, but this is the crafting guide, so we're going to craft everything, right? So next up is going to be the helmet. It's going to be literally exactly the same, not a tiny shred of a difference, right? We're going to grab our helmet, we're going to get it fractured with suppression. Again, try to get 12% suppression because it'll be easier to buy helmets and gloves with almost max suppression than it's going to be to buy your body armor with that much suppression fractured on it. So there's that, and then exactly the same thing. We use chaos res essences tier 3 until we hit one other resistance. So here we hit tier 2 pretty easily, and we got tier 9 life, so we're just going to roll over that. That's not good at all. Let's try to hit something better on the helmet, right? Let's see what we can hit. Oh, what was that? That was tier 8 lightning res, tier 7 cold res. We're just going to keep going. There is tier 1 cold res, right? So there we have it. We again have an open prefix, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to craft on armor, and we're going to craft, I'm just going to craft on hybrid. My bad. This is hybrid right here. So let's just craft this one, right? You craft that, we exalt slam. We actually hit tier 2 life, so that's the ideal scenario that you want. A high tier of life, amazing. And then to finish off, we just go projectiles pierce an additional target here as well, and then we're done, right? There's your helmet. Nice, exactly the same thing as your gloves. Chaos res, another tier of res, some life ideally in the prefix but not necessary, and then projectiles pierce. That is all, that is it. Implicits you already know. That's done, right? So next up is going to be the body armor. So this has to be strength dex, really has to be. It'll be much better if it is strength dex, but if you can't, again, you can go with evasion, fine, right? So you don't need to buy the most expensive base, because a fractured base Conquest Laminar will be extremely expensive. Try to go for something cheaper, like I'm using a Generals, I think. You can use a Dragon Scale, a Desert Brigandine. It doesn't really matter because we don't really need the armor and evasion. It is good to have some of it, but we don't need that much of it, right? And also we don't have that much strength anyway, so we can only use up to martials. So this is, I think you got Desert, right? Again, then when we go suppression, you want ideally 20% suppression on this, right? Depending on what your other gear pieces are like. But let's say that you bought exactly the ones that I have. So just trying to get this to be 20 fractured, and then we have to use the expensive essences, your essences of horror, right? So I'm not going to make you click this too many times, okay? We're going to try to click this 5 times, even though I've calculated that if you want to get good armors, you will need to use like 25 of these, or which is 5 divines, but 5 of these are 1 divine. So we're going to try to make this in 1 div. So first click. It's pretty decent. Like the tier 1 armor and evasion is nice. Even has some resistances on it, but we're going to click up to 5 times. We're not going to click 5 times. We're going to stop right here, right? That was 2 clicks, and we got life, hybrid life, and evasion, and open suffixes. So that's pretty good. Here you just want to craft physical damage reduction and then exalt slam something else, right? But if you can't get that, then just go again, right? We have 5 clicks, so we're going to use all 5. This is pretty bad. So not this one. This is not that great either. So 5th click. So that is what we ended up with on our 5th one, right? So you can see that you can get lucky or you can get unlucky. Right, so you can spend however many clicks you want on this. You just need the essence mod, and anything else good on this, right? Whether that is life, whether that is another resistance on the suffix. If you have a resistance on the suffix, you can actually ignore needing a resistance on your body, on your gloves or your helmet. So you get a resistance here, you don't need to get it there, right? So keep that in mind. If you don't have life on your body armor, you could use the life mastery on the passive tree as well. So that would be pretty nice, right? That's that. Just play around with this. Don't spend too much on these essences. That's why I just want to make it pretty simple. You don't need any insane mods here. You saw my own body armor, right? It has tier 4 life and tier 4 armor. So it's not great at all. Okay, so that's done. Now we're going to go over to the Abyss jewels that we use. Right, so we want murderous eye jewels because these give us all the claw damage notables, and you want to get this. You want to get this with, let me see here, lightning damage with claw attacks fractured on this. Now this will be one div. These are one div. Tier 2 fractures are one div. Tier 1 is way too high, so go for tier 2. Don't go for tier 3. Go for tier 2. If you can't get with claw attacks, get the normal lightning damage with attacks. If you can't get lightning, go for fire. If you can't get fire, go for cold. Right, so you have this. You don't need these, obviously. You can just buy like 20, 25C jewels as well with a lot of flat elemental damage on them. But ideally, if you want the best one, this is how you get the best one. Right, so tier 2 fracture, and then you just go into harvest, reforge lightning. And then you do this until you hit a lot of flat damage. So it's going to keep going until I see tier 1 or tier... Okay, so here we have dagger attacks. We don't want dagger, so we're going to go again. This is pretty nice. So we got tier 1 life, tier 3 lightning damage, and tier 5 fire damage. If you search up a jewel like this with life, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 5, it'll be like 2 div, 3 div, I think, because life is pretty expensive. But if you don't want life, you just keep going until you hit even more flat damage, right? So, and each of these clicks, by the way, is extremely free. This needs blue juice, like 75, I think, or 50 blue juice per click, which is extremely, extremely cheap. You can click this a lot without spending almost anything. I clicked this 24 times, and this is probably around like 20C gone so far. So it's really, really cheap, so you don't have to worry about spending too much. We got tier 1 lightning here. Let's see if we exalt slam something good. So here we have tier 1 lightning, which is insane. Tier 4 cold, pretty decent, and some armor. We don't really care about the armor, but this is pretty good too, right? So play around with this. If you want the most damage, then just get the most flat damage to attacks and to claw attacks. If you want some life, then get some life on this, like stop when you hit life, right? So that's pretty much it. And for the corrupted blood immune jewel, just go buy one. I didn't craft that. You just have to go search up on trade, try to find the best one, and buy it. So that's it. One thing to note though, that the corrupted blood immune jewel needs to have lightning res on the jewel, because you will not be able to cap yourself without that additional bit of lightning res that you're getting from that jewel, because it's not enough to have tier 1 on both your helmet and your gloves. You need a teeny tiny bit more from the tattoos and the jewel. That's it. That's all. I hope this helps someone. For any questions or anything, you can ask me in the Discord, you can ask me in the comments. I respond to every single comment ever. And yet again, my throat is absolutely dead from recording this for so long. So I hope this helps someone, anyone, and have fun. And remember,